A song before we break into a message. If you'd like to turn your Bibles to where we're going to, we'll be reading in just a few minutes in the 18th chapter of the book of St. Matthew, and we'll start at the 21st verse. But I'm going to try to do this song, and one reason I say try, I do desire your prayers. I think I told y'all the last time I was up here. Allergies have pretty much stolen the voice. About 7 or 8 years ago, when I was still with the Gateway Quartet, something happened to me, and I had no idea until actually we were going into the studio to record a CD. And I thought everything was fine. But when we got in there to start recording, my voice would go to a certain pitch. And if I tried to take it any higher, it was set. No. And I struggled with that for several months before it went away. The same thing has happened again. God eventually did restore, and I'm praying that He will again. But pray for me as I do this song. When I was singing with the quartet, we kind of adopted this, and to me it became a theme song for the longest time. There is coming a day when no heartache shall come, no more clouds in the sky, no more tears to dim the eyes. All is peace forevermore on that happy golden shore. What a day, glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. When I look upon His face, the one who saved me by His grace. When He takes me by the hand and leads me to the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be. Amen. And there'll be no sorrow then, no more burdens to bear, no more sickness nor pain, no more parting over there. But forever I will be with the one who died for me. What a day, glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. And I look upon His face, the one who saved me by His grace. He's gonna take me by the hand and lead me to the promised land. What a day, amen, glorious day that will be. Thank you, brothers. If I posed a question this morning and asked everyone in here, just life in general, if you were asked the question, do you want justice or do you want mercy? Which one would you take? I didn't hear you. Mercy. One time, and this has been, I'm going to tell this little story on me before we get into reading scriptures. Many years ago, I was on my way to work one morning, running maybe just that much late, maybe that much. Okay, let's be realistic. I was late. And I was buzzing along up 23. Not a soul anywhere on that road. So my foot got a little heavy. And one of these, you see these gentlemen out here all the time that drive these gray sedans around. The only thing I could figure at the time was this fellow was so impressed with my driving skills that he wanted to pull me over and he wanted to talk to me about it and find out where I learned to drive like that. Well, that's not really why. But he stopped me and he said, "Do you have any idea why I stopped you?" And I said, "Well, unfortunately, I have a pretty good idea." Well, he and I talked for a while, and a real nice gentleman. And finally, before he got the pad out, he said, "Well, Mr. Mullins, you seem like a fairly nice guy." He said, "You seem like a fairly nice guy. So let me ask you, do you want justice or do you want mercy?" At the snap of the fingers, I said, "Given that kind of option, I will take mercy any day." I don't know, maybe everyone in here is a Christian. I don't know why God has led us to this message this morning, but I know that God knows what He's doing far better than I know what I'm doing. So maybe everybody in here is a child of God, but sometimes I think we need to be reminded of Calvary. I think we need to be reminded because it's human nature. We tend to kind of forget. When things are going along so well in life, it's easy for the enemy to blind our eyes to what brought us to where we are. Then came Peter to him and said, "Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times 7? And Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times 7, but until 70 times 7. And then Jesus goes into a teaching experience and he says, "Therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants.
Bless you, Lord.
And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. Did a little research on that one time, and if this was taken in today's currency, he owed him well over $3 billion. Today's currency, not then. 10,000 talents, but for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife, and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him, and forgave him the debt. But the same servant went out, and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pennies. That amounted, according to what I could dig up, to about a little over $3,000. And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me that thou owest. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. And he would not, but went and cast him into prison till he should pay the debt. Now, I think there's a very clear definition, or a clear defining line here between what was justice and what was mercy. And I'm going to throw this in before we really get into what I feel to be the meat of the message this morning. If you look around and you see how we treat one another day by day by day, our God, the King of all glory, is a lot more merciful to you and me than we are to one another. Am I right? And I'm glad that when I was offered the option once about, I apologize, I lose track of time anymore. Sometimes I think I'm younger than I am. Sometimes I think I'm older than I am. But somewhere in the neighborhood of about 29 years ago, thereabouts, I was given, no, it's been longer than that now.
36.
Yeah, more than likely. Anyway, several years ago, I was given an option in a little country church whether to accept justice or whether to accept mercy. In all those years, Brother John Vance, I have never regretted the fact that I chose mercy. There used to be a song that went around a whole lot in a lot of the Southern Gospel circles especially, that said, if I had gotten justice, I would surely be lost. But I found mercy when I knelt at the cross. You see where these servants were concerned. The one that owed this man the greatest amount of money, and the man commanded that everything that he had be sold to settle the debt. And then, knowing that there was not going to be enough to fully compensate for the debt, he was to be cast into prison. Justice said, that's right, it's what needs to happen. But thank God, mercy stepped in and said, I'm just going to forgive you of all of it.
Bless him, Lord.
I remember Jesus, when he was walking this ugly old sin-cursed earth, he spoke of mercy and he taught mercy on a daily basis. And one of the most endearing passages to me is found in the 15th chapter of the book of Luke. If that book and that chapter doesn't ring a bell, I know this will. Remember the prodigal son. Jesus was speaking one time and he talks about a man that had, I don't know how much wealth that he had, but I know according to the way that Jesus spoke, this man was independently wealthy. He owned a vast amount of, I don't know, lands, herds, flocks, homes. He owned it all. And he had 2 sons. And one day the youngest son came to him and he said, now Dad, I know that I paraphrase a lot when I'm preaching, but just bear with me. The man comes to him and he says, now Dad, I know that at some point you're going to leave this life. And when you do, I know that there's a certain amount of your goods that's going to fall to me. Only thing is, Dad, I don't really want to wait until that happens. I want it now. And the man that owned this vast treasure, no doubt was very saddened by this, because he was seasoned. He knew what awaited the son out there in the world, and he knew that the son was making a mistake. Yet at some point in time, the man decides, okay, I'm going to do what you asked me to do. I've already taken the tally, I've added it all up, and this is the amount that's supposed to fall to you, so I'm just going to go ahead and give it to you. And it didn't take very long at all after this that the son took what the father had given him and made his journey into a far country. And we all know the story, and I'm not going to dwell on this a great deal. At least I don't think that's the way we're leading. But I am going to say this much. While the son was in that foreign country, the Word says that something happened to him that he had never experienced at home before. You see, you would have to know that in the Father's house, everything that this young man could ever have wanted or have needed was all there, and all he had to do at any time that he had a want or had a need, all he had to do was reach out and the Father provided. You remember when, and we're going to go way, way back in time now, to the story of Adam and Eve, when God created this planet, and in spite of what anyone else says, we are creatures of divine design. We were created in God's own image, according to what this book tells me. And I'll take what this book says and place it far and above anything that the most intellectual people out there in the world can come up with. We were created in God's own image. And God spoke to the couple that He'd created, and He took them to the Garden of Eden, and He said, all these things that you see, they're there for the taking. Every want or every need that you'll ever have is met right here. There's just one thing. The tree out here that's in the midst of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good, don't bother that, because in the day that you eat thereof, you will surely die. Well, we all know how that turned out, right? And we're not going to dwell a whole lot in that, but Adam and Eve, in one sense of the word, when they transgressed against the laws of God or against the commandment of God, they immediately took a journey. They were not transported probably physically like you or I would be, but in their mind and in their soul, they took a journey that led them and led mankind from then until now, led mankind on a journey farther and farther away from God. And what did we all do as we came up? You can look at any child of God that you want to in today's world, and I will guarantee you that at some point back in their lives, they found themselves at enmity against God. But thanks be to God, again, I'm going to say this, if we had gotten justice, we would everyone this morning be lost. But thank God, have you felt God's mercy? Do you know mercy this morning? I am glad that I do. But this young man took the goods that the Father had given him, and he took it into a foreign land. And then something happened to him, as I said, that he had never known before in the Father's house. The Word says that he squandered all of his goods, he squandered all of his money, he wasted everything that he had in riotous living. And then when all of his money and everything was gone, he began to be in want. He wasn't wanting a fancy automobile to drive around. He wasn't wanting fancy clothes. He was in want for something to fill his belly. He was literally starving to death. And the Word said that he went out at some point and he joined himself to a citizen of the country. In other words, he went out and got a job. And of all things, for a Jewish boy, for a Jewish boy to have to do, he went out and found a job feeding the hogs. Couldn't have sunk any lower if he had tried with everything, and that was the very lowest that he could go. Thanks be to God, the Word says that at some point he came to his senses. I'm glad today that God still allows, wherever you're at on this journey of life, if you're on a journey that's taking you farther and farther and farther away from God, bless God, justice says you get what you deserve. Mercy says He still allows U-turns. I'm glad that at one time, Esther, you know the story well, and I'm not going to bore these good people with it. I was considered the neighborhood good boy. But I was on a journey that was taking me farther and farther and farther away from God, and in spite of in my mind anyway, my high morals, I was still lost and headed for a devil's hell. Thank God, and I know I've told you the story before about the old preacher that pointed his finger that looked like a baseball bat. Thank God for that preacher, but most of all, thank God that mercy allowed me to turn. And I'm going to tell you today that I'm going to step out of context just a little bit and tell you that if you're here and you're taking your journey farther and farther and farther away from God Almighty, you need to turn, and you need to turn now. Remember reading a story many, many years ago about a ship that was out sailing on the ocean one night, and during the middle of the night, the watchman called and said, "There's a light out there ahead of us. There's a vessel that's approaching us real quick." So the captain got on the radio, and he radioed out there, and he said, "I am so-and-so, and I'm on this battleship, and we're on a collision course. You need to change your direction about 10 degrees to avoid a collision." Message came back, "I suggest that you change your direction 10 degrees to avoid a collision." This made the person so angry, the captain of the ship so angry, he sent back and he said, "This is Captain so-and-so of the USS Kentucky. I'm traveling with a fleet of the Navy's very best, and I am surrounded by so many battleships and so many. I will destroy you if you don't get out of my way. I will do whatever I need to do to protect this vessel. You change your course 10 degrees. And the word came back that said, "And this is a lighthouse. You make the call." God is not going to change His course. Amen? You change yours. But at some point, this young man came to his mind and he said, "Back in my Father's house, even the hired servants have bread enough to eat." And the Word says that he got to the point he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the hogs did eat. No one gave. Have you ever, most of y'all in here are now or have been country folk, you ever gone out to slop the hogs? You ever got so hungry that you wanted to eat the hog slop? Me neither. But this young man was in a terrible state of affairs. He was so hungry, he would have eaten the hog slop. And then he remembered, he said, back in my Father's house, even the hired servants have bread enough to eat and to spare. And I'm down here perishing with hunger. And I'm going to extrapolate on this just a little bit. I can envision this man saying, back in my Father's house, no matter how bad the storm is raging or how bad of a rainstorm we're getting, my Father's servants are in the house and they're good and nice and dry. And I'm out here getting soaked to the bone with every little rainstorm that comes up. I can imagine him saying, or at least thinking, back in my Father's house, when these nights get so cold that, that I can just barely sustain. Back in my Father's house, they've got beds. Man, they've got beds to lie on. They've got covers to envelop themselves. And I'm out here perishing in the cold. I'm starved to death. I'm getting soaked every day. And I'm freezing to death. And back in my Father's house, even his hired servants have all these comforts. I know what I'll do. I'll get up from this state that I'm in. Remember that lighthouse? I'll get up from this state that I'm in and I'm going to change my direction and I'm going back to the Father's house. And when I get there, I'm going to tell Him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and I've sinned in Your sight. And I'm no longer worthy to be called Your son. Just let me be a servant. And I've imagined time and time again how that every step this boy made on his way back to the Father's house. He was probably rehearsing. I know exactly what I'm going to say, and I know exactly how I'm going to put it. Listen, I've told you all the story about when I got saved and how when I left the church house that morning, I decided I was never going to darken the door of a Fruitful Baptist church again. But all that week, something was stirring down in my soul. And Ethel, I actually made up this thing in my mind. Not very many people know this. But I actually made up this thought in my mind. I'm going to go back up there next Sunday, and if I feel the same way, when I get up, I'm going to go to that altar and kneel down and ask God into my life. But I have got such a speech made, and I used to be fairly good at, coming up with things to say, to get out of there looking for it mostly. But all these things to say, and I had it made up in my mind. When I go up and kneel down at that altar, God ain't never heard a prayer like I'm going to pray. He's going to be He's going to be so impressed, and I'm just going to wow Him plumb off the throne. That's how I was thinking. I got up that morning, and all the way to church, I was rehearsing this in my mind, how this was going to go. Did you know when the invitation was given, and that stirring began in my heart and in my soul again? I got up and made my way up to the altar. And all I could do when I got up there was blah, 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 blah. All of the fancy words that I had were gone. But I do remember this. I said, God, I recognize the fact that I need You. Will You come into my heart like this preacher has told me You will? Will You save my soul? And bless God. Justice would have said, son, you've done wasted everything that I gave you. You've done squandered everything that you had. Go about your way now. Justice would have said that, but mercy said, yes, I forgive you. This young man, when he got back to where the Father's house was at, and I pictured this in my mind's eye time and time again. You know how it is, if those of you that have children, if they're out there somewhere, you know probably that they're going places you really would rather they wouldn't go. But still yet, you're always looking out there, hoping that someday they're going to come back. I've imagined this man standing out time after time after time looking down that dusty road that the son left on, hoping that he was going to see his son returning home. Day after day after day, and then one day, bless God, he looked out and he saw a very familiar form coming up the aisle. Man, and no doubt this son was thinking all the way, I know exactly what I'm going to say when I get there, but as soon as he got there and started his speech, the father, while he was yet a long way off, ran to him. I love that old song, God's hand reached farther down than I could reach it. God went a lot farther to come and save my soul than I could ever have gone in His direction. All I had to do was make the turn, and God was right. Had to make the turn, and God was right there. But the man went to his son and he called his servants and he said, come here. And probably the son started, but Father, it doesn't matter. Don't matter what you're home now. That's all that matters. And he told the servants, go and bring out a robe. Get these dusty, dirty, filthy rags that he's clad in. Get these off of him. He's my son. And I don't want to see him dressed like this. Remember that old song that says, I laid off the old coat and put on the new? And then he went on and he said, look at these dirty old sandals that he got. Shoes probably worn completely out. I remember a time back when I was a little boy and used to wear those old brogans. Y'all know what I'm talking about? A lot of times holes would wear in the soles of them, and Mommy and Daddy would cut a piece of cardboard and put down in the soles of them shoes. They were wore flat dab out, and I could imagine this man saying, look at the shoes he's got on. Go get some shoes and bring out here and put on his feet. He's my son. I don't want to see him like this. And then he went so far as to say, go and get a ring. A little bit of significance to that ring. In that day and in that time, that ring signified to the world what family this young man belonged to. Go get the ring and put it on his finger. I want everybody to know. And not only that, but go into the field, bring in the fatted calf and kill it, and let's make merry. Now, when this young man came up, the man would have been justified in saying, stop right where you're at. You asked me to give you your part. I gave you your part. You took it and wasted it. That's all on you. That's what justice would have said. But mercy said, bring out the robe, bring out the shoes, put the ring on his finger, and kill the fatted calf, and let's make merry, because this my son was lost, but now he's found. This my son was dead, but now he's alive. Jesus not only taught mercy from this standpoint, but one day Jesus was doing his preaching, and there was a woman that was brought to him. And you know who it was that brought him? Religious people. But they brought him and brought her, and they said this woman was taken in the very act of adultery. Now, Moses' law says she needs to be stoned. She needs to be put to death. What do you say about it? They were really not concerned about Moses' law. I have to believe that. What they were wanting to do, either one of two things. Vengeance, and they wanted blood from this woman. Or, and this is probably the most likely, they were tempting the Son of God. Now, Jesus didn't say a word. He knelt down. You all know this story, but I'm going to finish it out anyway. He knelt down and he started to write with his finger in the sand. And then when he stood up, and the woman standing there, no doubt trembling in fear, she knew what justice would dictate. This is a side note that I've thought of a lot of times, and I mentioned this at a church up in Pike County one time, and actually could feel a wall of ice between me and the congregation when I said this, but I want you to notice what happened here. The word says they brought the woman and said she was taken in the very act of adultery. That would indicate that there was a man involved as well. The man was not the problem. That's just something I've wondered about or thought about. But anyway, the woman knew that justice, she was going to be put to death. But Jesus, when he stood up and he looked at those around, he said, we're going to go ahead and do this like you all want to. We're just going to do it a little bit different. Let the one among you that is free from sin, you cast the first stone. That's all he said, and then he knelt back down and he started writing in the sand, writing in the dust, the dirt, or whatever. When he stood back up, there stood the woman all alone. I remember when I made my way up to the altar at Sookie Street Church, there could have been 100 people surrounding me at that altar, but it was entirely between me and Jesus. And Jesus said, woman, where are those that are accusing you? She said, I don't know. They're all gone. Now justice would have said, this woman truly needs to be put to death. That's what justice would have said. But mercy said, where are those that accuse you? And when she said, I don't know, they're gone. Mercy said, neither do I condemn them. Go and sin no more. Jesus not only taught about mercy and justice from this standpoint, but in his darkest hour. The Word said that he had gone through the mockery of a trial in Pilate's hall. He had already been betrayed by the people that he loved the most and held the dearest to him. They had all turned their backs and fled. They had all, barring none, they had all completely forsaken the Son of God. And he had gone through, and now we find him at a point where he is suspended on the cross. Spikes through his feet and through his hands. But I'm going to remind you of this. Like I said a while ago, a lot of times we just needed to be reminded of things. The spikes is not what held Jesus to the cross. We're talking the Son of God. The spikes, there has never been a spike forged that would have been capable of holding all that power to the cross. You know what held him to the cross? Love for you and love for me. Now we find him in his darkest hour. And on either side of him, there was a criminal that was being put to death. One of them started mocking him and started tempting him and saying, "If you're the Son of God, save yourself and save us." This man was getting justice. But the person on the other side of the cross said, "You're looking at this wrong. You and I are getting what we deserve. In other words, we're getting justice." But this man recognized the fact that justice for him is really not working out all that way. So he said, "You and I are getting what we deserve, but this man has done nothing to deserve the fate that was befallen him." And then he asked Jesus, he said, "Will you remember me when you come?" Not if you come into your kingdom, but remember me when you come into your kingdom. Man, there's been a lot of controversy over the next thing Jesus said. But the very next thing Jesus said is, "Today shalt thou be with me in paradise." This man knew that he was getting what he deserved. Justice would have said, "You're on your own." You know, I know Ernest Mullins, and as much compassion as I have, if I'm being crucified, my thoughts would probably be, "Leave me alone, mind your own business. I've got problems of my own right now, a little busy." Justice said, "You two are getting what you deserve." But mercy said, "Today shalt thou be with me in paradise." I love the phrase in Romans where he says, justice says the wages of sin is death. Mercy says, but the gift of God is eternal life. So I'm going to leave you with this, Brother Jeff, can we get a song? I'm going to leave you with this, and I'm going to turn the service back over to Esther. I'm going to ask you the same question that we posed at the very beginning of the service. If you had your choice today, and someone said, "Do you want justice or do you want mercy?" what would your answer be? And the same question right now today. If right now your soul was required, right now you were standing facing God, would you want justice? Think about this very seriously before you answer. If right now, in the next second, you knew that you were going to be facing the Almighty, the August God